Okay, so I want to formally welcome you all to the third roundtable discussion with the Expert Global Forum. I am Dr. Ali Nassar. I'm the Chief Executive Officer and Board Chairman for STOCUS. STOCUS is a training and development Australian organization. We are certified emotional intelligence experts. Our offerings come in different forms and shapes. We do training and development for executives, professionals, and practitioners. We do diplomas, certification programs, long courses, as well as bite-sized courses. All our trainings and courses are accredited and certified, and they carry CPD points that are locally and internationally recognized. Our group of participants today is global and diverse. So we have participants, as we mentioned earlier, from Australia, UK, Qatar, Lebanon, UAE, and Saudi. And we are a mix of professionals who are chief executives, franchise executives, management team members, researchers, hoteliers, specialists, as well as physicians, psychologists, practitioners, teachers, and students. Few housekeeping points before we start. You're invited to write your comments and questions in the chat box and kindly use the raise hand option. Towards the end of the session, I would like to kindly ask you to open your video cams so we can grab a group photo. And this session is being recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube channel. Once it's done, the support team will email you the link for that. Today, we are honored to have the guru, Naim Maadad, keynote speaking to us. With over 38 years in hospitality world across Australia, Asia, and the Middle East, in various senior management roles, Naim Maadad, the chief executive and founder of Gates Hospitality, has launched and operated some of the world's best hotels, resorts, spas, and lifestyle food and beverage concepts. Naim's career has exposed him to some of the best properties around the world and has been fortunate to partake and orchestrate several amazing openings and operations. Naim has occupied diverse executive leadership positions, and to mention some, Naim was the managing director for both the Six Senses Hotels Resort Spas and the Anantara Group, respectively, where he was instrumental in nurturing sound relationships with the owners, securing the best possible locations, negotiating and formalizing contractual agreements, and appointing teams to infuse and reflect the ethos of the brands. Being based in the Middle East, over the past 20 years, Naim has witnessed tremendous industry growth, gained a deep cultural understanding, and has been endorsed by principals and organizations alike. In 2010, Naim established Gates Hospitality, a homegrown hospitality company representing handpicked concepts catering for the affluent lifestylers. Gates Hospitality is the owning company of well-known homegrown brands such as Ultra Brasserie, the internationally acclaimed concept, Reform Social and Grill Dubai, Folie by Nick and Scott, as well as Publique, Dubai's premier après-ski chalet, Bristow des Arts, Six Senses, the Gibet, Red Farm London, at Covent Garden London, and Steakhouse at Trump International Golf Course, Damac Hills, Dubai. On behalf of STOCUS Australia, I welcome you, Naim, as a keynote speaker today, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Arlene. My head is kind of this big. The introduction is just overwhelming. Don't believe half of the stuff that's been said. The focus today really is all about leadership. And I think, as Dr. Arlene mentioned earlier, I think really no matter what line of business you're in, leadership is a key component that everybody should be embracing, practicing, nurturing, and last but not least, really putting to use day in, day out, because there's never an end to the success factors and the doors that the right leadership will open to the right candidate. Again, from a word, dimensionality, I think that it's important. The next slide really talks a lot about the aspects and all of the adjectives and nouns that are covered by the word leadership. And if I may, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this slide, but confidence is for me is a key trait to the leadership. For me, some of the favorite little nouns that are spelled out there: competence, achievements, integrity. So you can see all of these powerful words that really lend themselves into leadership traits that a lot of people practice day in, day out without actually realizing that they're putting them good use. The session today is really is very simple. There are 5 P's that I will cover. I'll talk about in details. The session can be questions throughout the sessions, or can be right towards the end. So I'd like to keep it as interactive as possible, if I may. And it's a general discussion rather than a speech. It's a discussion about my learnings in life, how I've come to be what I am today, the roads that I've traveled in order to put me where I am today, the ethos that I've been able to practice throughout my career and my working life in order to put me where I am in life today. So without further ado, I'm going to start. But before I do that, I just want to quickly define the word leadership, because again, it's one of those words that really we don't really think about a lot, but it entails a lot of power and a lot of resiliency. It's a noun. It's an action of leading a group of people and or organizations. And really, any organization has people in it. So it's about leading people. It's developing leading people. Synonymous with guidance, supervision, of course, initiatives, influence, control, governing to a certain extent. And last but not least, it's really leading by example and becoming a figure within an industry, within a business, within an organization that people look up on and say, that's the tone of the voice of the industry, of the business. 5 levels, as I've mentioned earlier, and really the graph that you're looking at is not anything special, but it tells you that the following have to be applied in order to make sure that leadership actually translates into the powerful tool it is. Level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they can't work individually. They need to actually develop over the years from 1 to 5 in order for the entire leadership action to be effective and powerful. Also, just because you move from level 1 to level 2 or vice versa, it doesn't mean that you can let go of the previous level. It's a building block. You can't take the lower level and keep the second level or the third level. They need to be all in harmony, working together. Also, the scale of the scale that it shows there, really, it's about the difficulties, about the rewards that people can gain out of them, and last but not least, it's the control level that it gives you in order to make sure that the procedures are natural and not imposed like the olden days leadership style of, I'm the boss, you do what I'm telling you. Those days have gone, and the new era that we're living in, we're defining, we're shaping is by gaining trust. It's by leading by example in order to make sure your leadership is effective and people follow you based on your actions and your acts and your words and your proof, rather than just because we happen to have the title. This leads me right into level 1. Level 1, they all start with the letter P, by the way, position. So again, a lot of us are, when we land a new role, the title is actually handed to us on a silver tray, irrespective of how much work has been done previously. The title is granted. So you start a new job and you have the title, whether you're a general manager, you're a CEO, you're a CEO, you have that title. And sadly, to a certain extent, a lot of people within the organization follow you based on the title that you're given. Very short-lived, because again, actions will become a lot louder than titles. And this is the lowest level of leadership because again, it's given, it's not earned. It is earned over time, but it's certainly not earned early in the piece when you start out a role. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having a leadership position. What is wrong is relying on that position or the title that you're given to actually get people to follow you, which doesn't last long because again, they work out what you're made from, what you really are on about, your qualities, your depth, your influence, and people will decide to follow you, support you, and become the team, the organization that you're trying to shape, or will start putting sticks in the wheels, or even take a leave and move on to other businesses or other careers. That's level one in summary. Level one for me, it's a prime starting point. It's a place where people should be investing in their growth. It's a place where, okay, I'm given the title, let me make sure that I invest in everything that I have so I can grow and become a potential leader within the organization, matching and over exceeding the title that I have. It's about making sure that you use the time to lead yourself as well, not just a team, because you need to constantly keep leading yourself and evolving through, of course, priorities, through objectives, KPIs that I've set up for the organization, starting with you as a person, as an individual. And all of these need to be guided by self-discipline. Again, I can't emphasize enough how important discipline is in these leadership roles, in these leadership positions, where a lot of times you have absolutely nobody to push you, nobody to challenge you. You do all of that for everybody else in the organization, but you are the one who's challenging everybody else. So you have to have the discipline, constantly pushing yourself to make sure that you are aligned with the objectives of the organization, and equally as important, everyone else is aligned with those in order to proceed as a team, as a group, rather than individually. The image that I put on screen for everyone, again, really summarizes that organizations are people, a team, and leadership is making sure that we set an example so people can follow our footsteps and make sure they nurture the business the way we see it moving forward. That's level one. Do I have any questions on level one, or should I proceed on to level two?
I think please go ahead, yeah.
Radio. So level two here is permission. Again, people follow because they want to. So you've ticked the box of level one. That position is secured, it's there. People choose to follow the leader. It's choice now, so people have that choice of following you. They get it. It's about making sure that we get to know the people within the organization. We actually understand their strength, their weaknesses, the value they add to the organization, and making sure we connect to them at various levels, understand their lives, understand their own objectives, their families, their careers, their aspirations in life, in order to make sure that there is alignment on the objectives of the organization, of the individuals, and last but not least, the way forward on that. A leader needs to like people. You can't work solo. You can't command and walk away, expect things that will happen without you nurturing these relationships. It's about making sure that a team operates fully in a way that is a nurturing environment, that is a space where people can ask questions. They don't feel intimidated by a leader or by the person in charge, so to speak. And if you do treat people in a way that they feel liked, admired, respected, this is really when you start seeing trust in an organization evolving. Trust takes shape naturally because you've come in with a position, you've set the tone of the organization, you've started to deliver, you know these people, you've actually developed a network of people around you, who are aligned on the company's objectives, on the company's direction, and last but not least, share your passion for the outcome, the objectives. Trust is built very quickly if these boxes are ticked. And then, of course, trust. If there is trust, there's always respect, and vice versa. If people respect the organization, if they respect the workplace, if they respect their own to-do lists, task lists, it translates into amazing output of work, amazing quality of work, and last but not least, a successful organization. Level 2, again with permission, it's where solid and lasting relationships are usually built in the cycle of the 5 steps. And really, again, it's foundation development. It's building the foundation and making sure that there is a very strong foundation, which becomes very essential and paramount for the success of moving an organization forward, for making sure that there's a sustainable environment ahead moving forward. And last but not least, stability of the organization and the innovation aspect. So we've covered product, we've covered permission, and I'm moving on to level 3, which is our production.
Naim, just note probably and a topic for discussion on level 2. In level 2, I have seen a lot of emotional intelligence competence required by a successful leader, if I may. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, EI, for me, it's really, I made reference to understanding your people. So if you are making an effort to learn about their objectives, their lives, their traits, their families, their happiness and their sadness, if that makes sense, this is where EI is built. Because once you have that emotional connection, once you have that emotional knowledge bank, then you're treating them as individuals. They're not just a number, because you know their likes, their dislikes, you know their power, you know their strength, you know what makes them actually get out of bed every morning, you know their motto. And when you challenge them, you can actually challenge them at that level. You can talk to them directly, keeping in mind the objectives of the organization. So it's not actually cheating by any stretch. It's making sure that you speak languages, you speak tones, you speak directives that actually resonate with them, which is very important. So emotional intelligence for me, it's really, look, once there is a trust is built on emotions.
A connection, yeah.
It's that connectivity between people, that understanding between people, and last but not least, it's the respect factor that I made reference to earlier. Because if people respect one another in an organization, respect is certainly not covered by level 1, because we respect you the first couple of months, but then you will carve your own road ahead.
Exactly. Precisely.
So I fully agree, Dr. Aline. I think EI is incredibly important. But again, as today's leadership management, I think EI is a factor that you see, again, in my own businesses, I refuse anybody to call me Mr. Maadad. It's Naim. Everybody uses my first name. And these little things, this is where the barriers are broken. This is where people they know that they can reach out to you and speak about their grievances. They can speak about their own challenges. They can highlight stuff that we don't see in the business, because we don't actually manage the business. We are miles away from the business. We direct the business management, but they actually manage the business day in, day out for us. You know, I keep saying to a lot of my guys, most of the transactions are made in my business when I'm asleep overnight, in hotels, restaurants, spas. It's usually overnight when transactions exchange hands. So we heavily rely on these people, and if they are engaged, involved, have the respect for the organization and believe in the leadership, then they'll deliver, because there's a clear message out there for everyone.
I so much see the leader as the conductor. So they orchestrate, but the band basically is the one that delivers. So if they play their instruments well, then you have a beautiful symphony. But the leader is the conductor who keeps everybody playing their instruments at the right time, at the right level. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, look, I think it's well put, it's well summarized, and as a conductor or an orchestrator, you're standing on stage and you're making sure that everything happens in the right motion, at the right time, at the right juncture, and last but not least, timely manner, because that's you're making sure that everything happens. Because again, I've seen a lot of organizations that are trying to do things that are not relevant to the market, even though they're great ideas. They just don't talk to the market that you're actually performing, which means that the conductor is not actually calling the right shots at the right time.
Absolutely, precisely. Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. So moving on to level 3, like I said, it's production. And the production part really for me is now you've been given the title, you've had time to work a little bit, there's been a bit of time to understand your team, they understand you, and there is a two-way street developed now between people, organization, leadership. The permission box is also ticked. So now it's about making sure people follow you for what you have done for the organization. Even if it's not your own organization, if you're new to a role in previous organizations. Because again, any industry, people can actually nowadays with the softwares that we have, with the connections that we have, people can do a little bit of digging and a lot of stories will surface very quickly, positive and negative. So people can actually do a lot of searching on backgrounds and kind of questioning what has this person achieved in their career, what have they done, how did they end up here with us, and on what merits have they joined this level. Leaders who produce, again, results build their influence and credibility. So influence in any organization, if you have the influence, if you have the connection, if you have the proven credibility in the past and moving forward, then that's where production is really showing and glowing as well. Work just gets done. Leaders can become the change agents. Again, a lot of times when I have joined organizations, 50% of the role is making sure that the new tone is my leadership style, my expectation from KPIs, and my business objective goals are well defined. So we are making sure that the new definition of the KPIs are very well spelled out and people can follow those. So if these are very well spelled out, people have done their searching and they believe in you and they endorse you, then goals become easy to achieve because everything's well defined and clear, so people can follow the path, the trail that has been laid out and make sure changes are delivered. Again, it goes without saying, if a whole team is moving in one direction, it's so easy to move forward or in that particular direction, then having different obstacles or different parts of the team pulling in different directions. So if the team is united, if the team is being well briefed, if the team is very clear on the directions that they're going on and everyone's plowing ahead with the same objectives, the same vision, the same mission, it's a very powerful statement. And that's what leadership's about. It's making sure, going back to your point earlier about emotional intelligence, making sure I can communicate within anybody at any level of the organization and speak their language, making sure that the ultimate message is translated in their language, in a term, the tone that actually they can relate to and hopefully help you deliver. And whenever that happens, really the team rises to the next level of delivery, effectiveness, cohesiveness, and making sure that there is unity. I'm sure you've heard me using the word unity many a times. Leadership's about unity because you can't be leading with different directions. You've got to lead in one direction. If there is unity, then the foundation that we spoke about earlier is very solid. And if the foundation is solid, then you're not having to look down anymore. You're looking up. So constantly looking at the future, at the next level, what's the next best thing that we can do rather than worrying about the foundation. Again, level 3 cannot separate from level 1 and 2. They need to be in harmony. They need to be building on and moving forward. And just making sure that the strategies are constantly evolving, communicated, shared, and again, reinforced in the organization. Next level of development after the production is a crucial level. And sadly, in my career, this is where you see a lot of people going in different directions because they feel that if there is unity, if there is a production, if there is influence, then the business is okay, it runs itself, and they take a step back. Leadership becomes less important in their set of eyes. And this is where you see a lot of organizations kind of plateau out. They just don't continue on plowing ahead and pushing the envelope from saying, let's develop, let's evolve, let's take our experience to the next level, let's take our offering to the next level, let's make sure we become pioneers in our scope, in our segment, in our industry. So level 3 is a very important, and usually the duration of level 3, it's a lengthy one. Again, you're talking about multi-cultures, you're talking about multi-beliefs, you're talking about multi-ideas, multi-wishes and goals. In order to get them all aligned, it takes a lot of time to make sure that people are united and aligned. That's my level 3. Do we have any questions on level 3, or shall I be moving on to my level 4?
I think given your experience and your specialized and quite good at gaining the buy-in of the team, maybe we can discuss that a bit, because I believe so much it just sits very well here at this level.
Yeah. Look, again, I think out of the 5 steps, level 3 is probably the most challenging, yet the most rewarding, because when you're talking about a buy-in, or the alignment, as I call it, it's making sure that the objectives are very well defined and stipulated. And that doesn't come through a mission and vision and value statement. That is every day, that we make sure that the same message is reinforced at different forums, in different venues, in different avenues, in different tones and languages, so everyone grasps it, and it becomes a fundamental in their way of conducting the business, in their way of conducting their chores, and making sure that they are representing the organization. The buy-in is challenging, particularly in places where you have a flat organization, where a lot of people have similar scopes, have similar empowerment levels, but they're all trying to go to the next level up. And this is where people become a little bit aggressive onto saying, how do I outdo my next best colleague in order to move up the ladder? But again, I think the clarity here is crucial, is key. If you have clarity well spelled out, defined, reinforced, and communicated at all levels of the organization, I think you will find that people will actually work together rather than compete. I have absolutely no issues with competition. I think it's very healthy within organizations to have competition, as long as it's not done for the sole purpose of individual gains. It should be for the industry, for the business organizational gains, rather than personal. Buy-ins, on a closing note, buy-ins, it's nearly impossible to have everybody's buy-ins unless you go back to level 2 and develop and nurture that understanding of individuals, because you need to know where are they going in life. What do they want out of this? Do they want my job, or do they want to open their own business, or do they want to farm out and do another skill set altogether? Once you understand that, then you can help them, support them, and hopefully fast forward or help them define their own objectives and goals, and hopefully draw up a map for them, or a roadmap to say, this is the best way. I strongly suggest you go about ABC in order to achieve your objectives in life, based on my experience, based on my know-how, and based on my views of the marketplace today. Goals, objectives, we all have them in life. You know, some are as basic as getting a job. Some are as difficult as conquering an industry. But once they're defined, once they're communicated, I think the buy-ins are very clear. Because some people just want to do a job. Some people want to excel at a job. And it's very hard to find and match a lot of the times.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. So level four, people development. So again, we're still talking about people. Leadership. You can lead a business, but really, principally, all you're doing is you're leading people. So if you develop people, they will actually follow you and they'll stick by you based on your achievements in life, based on the boxes you have ticked and the changes, the pioneering that you have done in your sector, in your career. And I think this is very powerful level. So if you reach level 4, I think you're nearly out of the woods, because level 3 is where a lot of people, like I mentioned earlier, just say, okay, I've conquered it, I've done it, I'm a GM now, I'm a CEO, I've done it, I'm good. I can just control, cruise mode, and everything's going to be okay. Life doesn't work that way, because there is somebody else out there who's more ambitious than you, who's more driven than you, who has a different agenda, or who has a leader on top of him or her that actually pushes them harder. So we need to keep in the back of our minds that discipline, as I mentioned earlier, is always a powerful tool. That if we need to apply discipline without being driven, we need to apply discipline to ourselves as well. People development, it's making sure that identifying and developing as many leaders within your establishment, your organization as possible. And once you identify them, and these don't all have to be CEOs, by the way, but they could be the next level up, or they could be where the vacuum in that particular business is. Once they are identified, then this is where a career path or a development plan needs to be actually drawn up. And this is when you start investing in these people and help them develop and grow to align the success of the organization and their own objectives and career goals. Once they're identified, 3 things will happen. Number 1 is they feel special. They feel recognized. And last but not least, they'll actually give you 1,000%, because they know they've been identified and they know that you're actually fulfilling their objectives and their dreams. So it becomes a very powerful tool by supporting them, because they'll give you 2-folds back to the business. Of course, the more leaders within the business, or the more people that you have selected, you have nurtured, you have invested in, the better the organization is going to be, or the better that your own KPIs will be achieved. The mission will be accomplished, principally because what you have done, or what you are doing, is you're identifying talent based on their experience, based on their know-how, based on their skill set, to support the organization. They have that in them. They have the admiration, aspiration to actually grow and evolve. The business requires that skill set. So at the end of the day, level 4 is win-win. If you can identify, invest, develop, and turn someone's dream into reality. Now, a lot of times this doesn't happen because the size of the organization doesn't allow you to identify too many and grow too many. But I think it's about making sure that communication and that whole relationship between people and the business is very clear, and saying that it's not a point that I haven't identified you, or that you haven't done a good job, or you can't do a good job. The issue is timing. So as long as you communicate that to them, as long as they know they've been recognized, identified, and their career is planned for them, or you're helping them to plan, they will stand by you and they'll deliver. Which again goes back onto that foundation. How solid is that foundation? Because they actually become the foundation for you. And if you develop this skill set in people, and these vacuums that your business has and the people have solutions for, then all you're doing is you're strengthening the foundation of the business. And once that foundation is super solid, the only way you can move is forward, and make sure that the business grows, make sure that your own success stories are celebrated, and last but not least, if an organization is winning, then the team is winning, and everyone's proud all of a sudden. A couple of my own examples. We attend a lot of events, and Time Out Awards, the What's On Awards, the Hospitality Associations Awards, and every time that any of my GMs go up on stage and they come back, you see them holding a trophy, and they're super proud. People always come up to me and say, "Excellent, well done." I'll say, this is actually not a success for me. This is a success for these guys, because these trophies, these awards, they actually belong to them. They go on their CVs. I don't have a CV. I don't list all of these trophies. So it's a reward for these guys who have actually made the transition, made business KPIs a reality, and have delivered on our business objectives. So it's very powerful. These awards, the following day, the following month, business doesn't change. Our revenues don't escalate overnight because of these awards. What actually escalates is the confidence in the team, the happiness in the team, and the reward factor that you have given them that's been recognized by the industry and has been recognized through their colleagues and through their immediate families as well. When they go back home and they say, my place has won this award. Unbelievably powerful feeling, and they feel super proud. And all of a sudden, you've signed them up for another 12 months without them realizing. But everybody wants to be a part of the success story. So it's very important to remember that. Again, by nurturing these people, by identifying them, developing them, and making them leaders, principally what you're doing, even if they leave you in 6, 12, 2 years, 4 years, don't underestimate the power of you as a leader changing their lives. And again, another example that I give you, a lot of the basic example, a lot of the guys who come in and join us as stewarding in the kitchens, they're coming in, the poor guys, very little experience. All they're doing principally is for an 8-hour shift, their head is in a sink and they're scrubbing pots and pans and plates and emptying bins. Hard work. But sadly, they are at the bottom of the hierarchy. They are hardly ever recognized. They're there, they do a lot of work, they clean the kitchens afterwards, they clean the lobbies and so forth, but they're hardly ever recognized. But what happens is, a lot of these guys, when they join us as on a stewarding level, the minute that we have an opportunity for them, the minute they actually show some interest in moving into a kitchen role, into a front of house role, we try and help them based on their interest, based on their fulfillment, based on their objectives in life. And again, that's when we start knowing them and knowing where they're going in life. Or what we have done is you move them from cleaning pots, dishes and pans into a customer service area. You've changed their lives, principally. And for me, that is an absolutely a rewarding factor, because without a word of a lie, there's not many hotels, London, Australia, Dubai, that I walk into without somebody coming out of the blue saying, "Oh, Mr. Naim, good to see you." And honestly, it's such a rewarding feeling, because nobody comes up and says hello because they hate you. They all come up and say hello because they've worked with you, or they've been in your leadership scope, or they've worked somewhere where they've recognized you. And for me, that's very rewarding to see them growing in life, to see them becoming the people, the leaders they are in their own world, in their own field. For me, that's very fulfilling, and that's leadership. I've changed their lives for the better. They've become an important part of our community, our society, our economy, and they help our industry move and evolve in the right direction. Level 4. So I'm nearly on level 5, which is really the last level on the leadership that I'll talk about today. But I just want to repeat a couple of points on level 3 and level 4. Level 3, danger zone. I strongly urge everyone to be very careful when you feel you've hit that level. I strongly suggest is that focus is blinkers are on, and just focus heavily, because no one ever reaches the epitome. It's time to keep pushing forward and making sure that you make that level 4. Now, once you make level 4, surround yourself with good people and invest in their development. So Gates now is 10 years old. I have people, actually Sanjay is one of them who's on the call today. Sanjay's been with me now for 21 years, so pre-Gates. Sanjay, block your ears for a second. This is not because we pay them above market price. This is not because, it's because we treat them as people. We know they have their own lives. We know they have their own careers. We know they have their own objectives. And we know that their vision and our visions are aligned. They understand us, we understand them. Does that mean we argue and fight? Absolutely. Do I still have an opinion and have a voice? Absolutely. But how do we do it? When do we do it? And how is the tone passed on? That's really what it's all about.
Well, I can definitely support that when you mention Sanjay. I've seen it, I've touched it. Maybe Sanjay, you can open your cam so everybody can see who Naim's talking about. If that's convenient.
I hope it's convenient. I hope he's in the office.
He is, he is. He was just setting the background.
That's Sanjay. He's always in the background. Just when you need him, he's there. That's Sanjay. I want to move to level 5 if I can, unless there is any questions from the floor.
I think we're good to go.
Right here. Again, this leadership now is in true form, and this is where people follow you where you are. They don't actually follow your title, your position, your permission. They follow you for what you have done, for the qualities you have displayed in your life as a person, as a professional, as a society member, and what you principally represent overall as a public figure or individual. Pinnacle is quite an expressive level of leadership. What happens is all of a sudden you have the luxury of choosing multiple. Every time you have a role that becomes vacant, you don't go looking for people. You have a knowledge bank. You have a CV bank of people that you actually want to work with, and vice versa. And for me, this is what leadership's about. It's people want to work with you because the recipe is proven. It's tested. They've seen you in action. You've seen them in action, and the sooner you join forces, the better the organization is, the better the process is ironed out and moves forward. Very, very difficult to attain because, again, the Pinnacle is usually a very small space. So if you place your foot on the wrong side of the Pinnacle, you tip. The exposure to the Pinnacle is also very limited. So not many people actually see, feel what happened at the Pinnacle. So you're being judged typically, and without sounding negative, you're being judged from below. People are looking up rather than people are looking down. So the Pinnacle is a very risky place to be standing. Even though you have proven, you have delivered, you've surrounded yourself, you've invested in people, but sometimes circumstances, and I take COVID-19 as a classic example, circumstances have pushed me as an individual, for example, to lose 25% of my workforce. That was never the plan. I never hired to fire. But sadly, the Pinnacle I had to make a decision. Is it about the organization savior or is it about the individual? And that's when it becomes very tricky and challenging. Also, on a Pinnacle, again, decisions that are made are not for today. They're not for tomorrow. They're for medium to long term. So principally what you're doing, the decision you're making today will impact the business in the medium and the long term span of that cycle of the business. Of course, keeping in mind new businesses, keeping in mind competition, keeping in mind global circumstances and all of that. But the longevity part of it is what you are planning is all of the points, all of the actions, all of the to-do lists that you as a leader can actually impact, control to a certain extent. And that's why it's that the plans need to be for long term, because you've done the hard work, the foundation's been set. again, it's about investing your life into your team's lives as well. So this is where nurturing becomes equally as important. It doesn't stop just because you've given them a job, just because they've become the next level up, doesn't mean the aspiration has actually stopped or evolved sufficiently. It continues on evolving, continues on having needs. So you need to keep making sure that lives, objectives are very well spelled out in the cycle of the strategy of the planned life, and last but not least, communicated across everybody else. Level 5 is about developing the organization. It's making sure that the discipline at the senior level is practiced independently. So you can't be a manager who has a micro approach. It needs to be macro, it needs to be big. You're setting the tone for an organization, and hence, if you have identified the right people, if you have empowered the right people, if you have put them in the right roles, then your role in life becomes a lot freer to plan for longevity, to plan for the future, knowing full well that you have appointed, developed, nurtured the right people for the right roles. So those particular little sectors, these little segments are in good hands, in people that you have chosen, you have developed, empowered to run that little cycle of whatever it may be. Friction happens in silos of businesses, so you have various department heads, various leadership roles that overlap. And again, at the Pinnacle, this is where you need to be very effective and make sure that you remind everybody of their objectives, their roles, their responsibilities, and their risks as well, in order to make sure that flat approach is done from a neutral favoritism as such. The organization at level 5 is mature by then. What happens typically at a level 5, there is a level of confidence tone that is set in the team. There's a level of eagerness that is practiced daily in the team. There's a level of competence, and last but not least, there's a level of envy from the comp set. So it's very important to keep one's feet on the ground, to make sure that they keep connected with the business. And no matter how high up or low down you are, the roles, responsibilities, objectives don't change unless you change them as a leader. And you need to make sure that there's always spot checks, there's always value checks, there's always competition checks, and making sure that their organization stays on brand, whatever that brand is, whatever that objective is. We need to make sure that it doesn't steer off by the COVIDs of this world, or by a recession, or by a hotel next door, or by a new university that's opening up, or a new course that's being offered. We need to make sure we stay on brand and try and not dilute the brand by offering other bits and pieces that don't actually complement the brand, but compete with the competition. But they're distractions. They're nothing else but distractions, because they don't add any leadership strength or longevity strength. I can talk about this for hours. For me, leadership is not about, there's not enough books that you can read to make you a better leader. I think leadership is here, and it's here. I think leadership is more about practicing what you preach. It's about making sure that you probe, question, understand, be involved in the operations, in the organizations, and make sure you understand every role's difficulties and processes, so you can challenge the people in the right fashion. And just because you're the boss doesn't mean you're right. Just because you are the leader doesn't mean you have the ultimate say. You need to be able to challenge people for the better of the business. And once you do that, trust is gained, respect is gained, and ultimately, as a result of all of this, success is the outcome of the business. That's my 5 levels in a very brief discussion. Really, what I want to
now.
George?
Yes, I have a question for Naim.
Yes, please.
Naim, where do you think leadership is mostly tested?
Yeah, look, leadership is mostly tested, again, when you have an ownership. And I'll give you a classic example of a hotel, right? I'm going to talk about my world. So in my world, there is an operator, right? There is an owner, and there is asset management. And usually these three are not always aligned, because the owner has an objective of either commercialism, egoism, or not understanding the business by any stretch. An operator has an objective of keeping the brand or keeping that asset under their branding and making royalties, commissions, fees, principally. Right? As asset management, you're trying to please the ownership, making sure the commercialism is delivered, the asset positioning is attained, and last but not least, the business is delivering on its objectives. As I said, making sure that you keep on brand. As far as an operator is, you become the enemy as well, because you're actually questioning an operator's work. You're testing their grounds. You're probing, questioning every move they're making, if you feel that there is a need. So leadership here is making sure that, again, you go back to the basics and you say to yourself, what is the endeavor of that business unit? What is the outcome expected out of this business unit from the ownership, from the operator, in order to make sure that the leadership of the asset management, for example, is balancing the equation. It's about understanding what is the objective that you've set out to do. And that objective typically ticks 4 boxes: positioning in the marketplace, the commercials, life cycle, and last but not least, its involvement in the marketplace and where does it sit in the comp set. Again, George, I think the question is very powerful, but leadership is making sure that you sleep well at night time, because you practice fairness, 1. 2 is you really apply all your skill set. 3 is you stay on brand and you pull others on brand as well, because it's your responsibility to do so. And last but not least is making sure that you constantly remind yourself that discipline is your job, nobody else. A job description, a scope, none of that actually applies. You need to every morning get up and say, today I'm going to conquer A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. And trust me, I do it every morning. I have a list every morning. I wake up in the middle of the night and I have a pen and a paper next to my bed. Probably old fashioned, I don't type into phones. I still write points down. So when I wake up the next day, I think, I'm glad I wrote this down because I need to follow up.
Yeah. Thank you for your answer. One more question, Naim. I mean, obviously you've been into many leadership roles into different organizations, and some of those roles were transformative by nature. So, what type of leadership you think you brought in a transformative context?
Delicate question. I'm sure I'm going to upset some people if I answer it from here. Look, again, a lot of times, George, I think as a leader, as an astute operator, you need to step in and say, what is the objective, and what is the timeline? Because objectives and timeline need to go hand in hand in order to achieve the cycle. And making sure that whilst you assess the objective and the timeline, you say, what is the industry honorable thing that I will be doing, any industry that you're in? Because when you come out, if you've left enemies behind, enemies will look at themselves in the mirror and they'll say, the bastard was right, forgive the language. And the non-enemies, the good guys, will say, he did the right thing. So ultimately, leadership is about making sure that you deliver on what you believe is right for the organization in any given time or situation, keeping in mind that leadership is, you can't lead on your own. Leadership is involving a team, an organization. It's involving the overall objective of the team and the organization and pushing forward.
Thank you. It's a great answer, and I would just love to say, I loved when you mentioned the word alignment, because I believe we cannot be in agreement all the time. So alignment is a great platform to start from in any leadership situation. So that's That's a great.
Thank you, George. I've got this slide that I felt is also fairly powerful, and again, I think throughout the discussion today we covered all of these terms: compassion, passion, sincerity, sensitivity, honesty, determination, humility. Again, it's such a massive topic. Really, the minute you start talking about leadership, it's one of those topics that it entails everything, and you constantly are on stage. You're constantly being benchmarked, judged by your own team, by your audience, by your owners, by your consumers. So leadership is actually quite a hot spot to be in. But again, I think if people just perform to the best of their ability, best of their skill set, best of their education and experiences, then people can't judge you incorrectly. Intelligence, trustworthiness, humanness, courage, and discipline, I think, is really, these are the 5 adjectives that really for me stand out, because under each one of those, intelligence is talking about your achievements, your education, it's talking about your speed of reaction, your wittiness. Trustworthiness, it's making sure that your past is reflecting what you're doing, endorsing what you're doing. Your words have been delivered upon, and your actions matched your words. The humane part, again, once you understand the team and once you start accommodating for their requests that are aligned with their business, then they know that you're just like them. You have your own objectives, you have your own work ethics, you have your own humane needs. You just happen to be the leader of that particular segment or that group of people. But it's about transparency. Courage and discipline. I left those as the last 2. Look, courage. We live in a world that's intimidation or bullying, as it's referred to now. It's so well practiced, and it's the norm. I think the social media has given people power to hide behind a screen and say anything that comes on their mind without any respect, without any fear, because no one's going to answer you back. And if they were to answer you back, it's going to be on screen. There's no confrontation whatsoever. So for me, courage is really, once you have that development box ticked, once you have the passion box ticked, once you have the skill set, once you've delivered, I think courage should be practiced. Courage should be empowered. And mistakes do happen. We all make mistakes. As long as we don't repeat the mistakes, it's very important. So courage for me is one of those traits. And I'm not going to cover discipline. I think I've spoken enough about discipline. I think it's a weakness that the human race shares, lack of discipline. And I think the more we endorse that, the more we enforce that into our lives, our families, our kids, our teams, the more disciplined you are, the more the organization is successful. I'm going to try and be quiet for a second, and I'd love to hear some more questions if I can.
Yeah, Fahim, go ahead, please.
Hi, Naim. Fantastic insight so far. Excellent. It's been amazing so far. So here's a question. Basically, you know, sometimes you have to. Some people create impact on people's lives outside the organization. So you know, the way you talk to people, I think that somewhat relates to the 5th level that you talked about. You know, who you are, what you represent. Sometimes you teach people how to deal with things outside the organization in their normal life. So people see that from their leaders. The question is that more of a leadership quality, or is it really a personality that some people would have and some not, in terms of, you know, guiding people how to deal with things and how to approach things?
Yeah, thank you for him. Good question. I'm going to take you back to level 3, where we have influence clearly identified as a key pillar here. And influence, even at the supermarket, sometimes you're influenced by an advert or by the teller. But influence, we are all influenced in a different way and different means. And what actually is a trigger to you may not work for me. So influence is based on our needs, our social bubble, so to speak. What we listen to and what gets our attention is not the same for everybody. It depends on your age group, your demographics, your I don't want to say category of lifestyle, but it depends where you are in life. So influence is not necessarily always from the inside. Influence is what we are seeking to learn, what we are seeking to develop, what we are seeking to discover, I guess, to a certain extent. Because we seem to be attracted to things that we don't have answers, or things that we'd like to develop or like to learn more about gets our attention. And that influences us to a certain level. So inside the organization, outside the organization, I think if people are disciplined and they have identified what they want out of life, professionally and personally, there's absolutely nothing wrong with gaining influence as long as it's aligned on brand, on your brand, whatever that is. I think it's a very powerful, it's a way of learning, if I may define it as such. You're influenced by things that you want to develop, but to nurture.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Fahim. I did get a question in the private chat, and it's basically asking you your opinion. We see a lot of leaders not very strong on developing their team. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, tricky question. Not a good question, not a bad question, a tricky question. Look, again, sadly, a lot of people are afraid by developing others because they have a personality weakness, because they're afraid that if you know more than me, you're going to replace me sooner or later. So if I develop you less, then the business is always going to need me as a number one or as a leader. That's one point. I'm not making references to anybody in specific here, but this is based on my experience. The second one is a lot of people that are in leadership positions now have been put there for the same reason, because their boss doesn't want someone too strong either in the business. So he or she can be controlled as well. And the third point, a lot of people that are in leadership positions are not necessarily there because they qualified, they deserve to. It's just, if you take the previous cycle of work ethics, again, I was based in Japan for 4 years, and my thesis for my master's was on lifetime employment. People have qualified for jobs just based on the duration of service they have given a company. So we see it a lot today, just because somebody...
Familiar with that, I said.
Yes. We've all seen it, and we all question it and say, why are you in that role based on what
number of years they've served in that company or that department.
Exactly. There's a part of that as well, which is changing rapidly now globally. And the last one, a lot of leaders are introverts as well, which is they have a massive phobia of dealing with others. So whilst they have a very clear strategy on paper, they can't communicate that. I hope I've answered the private question.
Yeah. Oh yeah. A lot are, as you mentioned, threatened by developing their team because they're worried someone would probably rise as a cream to the top and take over their role. Agree with that. Any other questions?
Do you mind, Ali, if I can contribute to the same question for a few seconds?
Yeah, please, of course.
Yeah, well, actually, I love what Naim said, and yes, there is a fear of people who are on the rise. However, I see this from a little bit different perspective, because those leaders, or leaders in general, to be able to reach the pinnacle stage that Naim perfectly stated it, are leaders who normally are able to manage shame, blame, guilt, ego, and judgment. So once they reach to the pinnacle stage, then they will be able to form A-stars team around them. And they are not intimidated from the A-star teams. So my, I would say, tip here is those leaders are not doing it on purpose. They have issues internally that they are not being able to manage, because leadership starts from within. So there is nothing personal. It's a state of mind that they are in through some sort of I would say, career. So yeah, so that was my little sense of wisdom.
George, you've hit the nail on the head when you made
Very beautiful sense of wisdom. Bang on.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the floor? From the screen, I should say.
Yeah. The screen is the floor nowadays. Okay, if no more questions, I want to very dearly thank you, Naim, for a beautiful talk, and the participants for beautiful time that we spent, for the discussions, for the input. And if you don't mind, all just opening your cams for a group photo.